I've got a fair number of video games that I've been playing uh, at various points over the last, so far this calendar year, that I have failed to talk about, but meant to. Here's one of those. Actually, the one that I finished most recently, meaning that a bunch of others are sitting in the back of my head with the memories staling. But anyway, Jotun, I believe that's how it's pronounced. So this one I was primarily attracted to because of the developer, because this is made by Thunder Lotus. These are the same folks who made Spiritfarer, and I love Spiritfarer. I think that is an absolutely stunning and amazing game, and it actually has gotten me into a whole other genre. I have tried out Stardew Valley, and I'm actually enjoying it quite a bit. And pretty much the reason I was like, maybe I will give that a try was because of the homestead aspects of Spiritfarer that it interwove with its wonderful characters and amazing story and heartbreaking nature. But this is not a review of Spiritfarer. I did one of those already. But this was the game that Thunder Lotus made before that. And you can kind of tell. First of all, their gorgeous animation style is still very much here and very much present. However, you can see that it's not as good a match to the material as Spiritfarer was. That's not to say that this sort of setting was the plot's super easy. You play a Viking warrior, and she died in a shipwreck, which is not a glorious death in battle, which means she does not get to go to Valhalla, but she is effectively given a chance to earn her way into Valhalla by stomping through a number of settings and locations from Norse mythology and murdering a whole bunch of mythological figures, or at least variations on them. So that's the basic structure of the thing. And so with that in mind, this is a much more combat heavy thing. The Spiritfarer didn't really have combat. Closest it came to combat was the stuff with the dragons, which was just repurposing existing mechanics in something that was vaguely like combat. It wasn't really, it was more of a platforming challenge. The thing is, even though this is gorgeous and I think looks very good and, complements the setting and the tone and everything else, the problem is the nature of the animation sometimes makes the hitboxes tough to judge. I learned early on that the axe that I can wield basically swings a little bit further than I think it does most of the time. But on occasion, it ends up coming up short from where I think it should be. So this is one of the problems with these kind of really lovingly animated 2D kind of things, is that the hitboxes often don't quite line up where you think they do in terms of what you're hitting or what is hitting you. So while that is a bit of a knock on this, and I think the more platforming and homestead creation kind of gameplay aspect of Spiritfarer suits their art style overall a lot better, it doesn't completely damage it because the game is basically the exact length that it should be, which is about 6 hours. I know for some people, like, that's a knock on a game that it only lasts a few hours, but for me, it's the exact length of time for me to get used to the idiosyncrasies of the controls and the combat that I can get through this stretch of time. But if it had been any longer, those slight annoyances would have just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, a good example of where that happened for me was with Final Fantasy VII Remake. I never fully gelled with the combat there, and while an issue was like, I don't love it, but this is okay. By the time I rage quit that game, while it wasn't the combat specifically that made me rage quit, I did by that point hate the combat, because the issues I had with it, I just had to deal with it over and over and over and over again over like 40 hours of gameplay. So yeah, by then I hated it. But for 6 hours, no, I can put up with this. And it really is, I think, the ideal length for what this is trying to be. Gameplay-wise, it is a mix of sort of low-level exploration as you work your way through the various places that you end up. Like, thematically, it's all fairly basic. There's there's a forest, there's a mine, there's some mines, there is a place with lava, there's ice. It's the kind of thing that you'd expect to see. And then there's usually some degree, I guess you'd call them puzzles. Usually what I would consider to be navigation puzzles, trying to figure out how to go from here to here to here to here and how to like open up this path. And it's all pretty intuitive. I think I only needed to look something up once, that's low for me. And again, the spaces are just big enough that it works. And also, actually, I think the way the map works complements that really well, which is the map is pretty complete when you first get there. Now, it doesn't show you where everything on them, like it shows you the whole layout, but doesn't show you like noting on the map of, oh, here's a thing you'll want to get to. Here's a thing. But like looking at it and going, okay, well, that looks like, there should be something there. Maybe I'll figure out how to get there. Like you'll find pretty much everything. But what is kind of neat about it for the purposes of navigation is that your placement on the map isn't marked. So you pull up the map, it shows you the map, doesn't show you where you are on it. You got to figure that out for yourself. But the areas aren't so sprawling that that's impossible to do. And they're just big enough that it feels kind of rewarding to be able to keep track of where you're going. But I think more than anything, the main focus on this is the boss fights. There are, I would say, 6.5 boss fights, because there's basically like a tutorial mini boss kind of thing at the open. But then you've got your 6 boss fights. And this is going to be an odd comparison to make, considering how little I played the game I'm going to reference. But the combat reminds me a fair bit of Dark Souls, both what little I played of Dark Souls, but also a lot of what other people talk about when they talk about playing Dark Souls, which is that because a lot of the movement, especially a lot of your more powerful stuff, is very deliberate, and starting like your more powerful attacks kind of locks you into it, you really need to be certain about the timing of when you're going to do certain things, and otherwise be prepared to roll out of the way or run away, or and in general keep an eye on what your opponent is doing and what their attack patterns is and the order of that things happen and the pace at which they are doing their thing. It escalates over the course of the fight as they lose health, and it works pretty well because by and large, once you've gotten them down to about half health and you've seen, whatever shift in their tactics happens at that point, then you've seen pretty much everything that they're going to throw at you. That doesn't mean you're immediately going to be able to deal with them, though. Like, you'll be able to tell, okay, I know how to beat this boss. Avoid this, deal with that, take out that, hit them at this point, repeat. Seems simple enough, but again, because your attack is so deliberate and your movement is not especially fast, it is not hard to mess that up, but it really does feel like, well, that's your fault. You knew what you had to do, and you either, lost patience because you tried to do it too quick, or you forgot this part of the attack pattern. Like, you always feel like when you lose, it's your fault, which is generally a very good sign of a well-designed fight, because when it feels like you lose because the game cheated or it did something that you feel like you could not possibly have avoided or predicted, that just leads to a kind of frustration that's like, why am I even here? But when you lose in a way that makes you go like, okay, I know why I lost and I know better than that, that's the kind that makes you want to go again. And just, all right, I know what I did wrong. Let me show you that I know. And again, I think 6.5 bosses is the perfect length before the limits of the combat system would have been stretched too far, because even by the 6th thing, you've gotten various abilities at various points, and they all have cooldowns, and not cooldowns. They have limited use. You can only use your healing so many times. You can only use your projectile so many times. You only have one projectile. This ability, that ability, and they're varied enough that, especially during the last boss fight, because it did beat the game, most of them are going to be useful over the course of that fight. But at the same time, I don't think they could have added any more that wouldn't have felt superfluous, and I don't think stretching the game out any longer than it is would have benefited it, because it just would have stretched the capabilities of the combat system beyond breaking point. And it's really well balanced in that sense. It is ultimately a game where my primary memory of it is frustration. But again, it's the kind of frustration that's motivating. So ultimately, I did enjoy my time with it. It's certainly not going to stick with me, not even close to the way something like Spiritfarer did. And even amongst action-oriented games, it's not something that I think I'm liable to go back to again. But at the same time, I was glad I finally got around to playing it because it's been sitting in my Steam library for a while. And I don't know what its standard price is, but whatever you think is a fair price for a 6-hour gaming experience, I felt like I got my money's worth out of this. And I always appreciate a game that realizes not to outstay its welcome, considering that play length is overemphasized a lot in games, I think. But it's visually very well done. I can't speak to the authenticity of the mythology as presented or of the lines, because it's all, I'm not sure what the language is. It sounded like it might have been German, or it might just be Norse, or it might be any number of things. But I can't speak to its authenticity or how well it honors any of that stuff. It felt like it was honoring that. It's like it deviates from the pop culture understandings of these figures and these realms in a way that feels like maybe it's sticking closer to something truer, but like that's being said by someone going purely off just the feel of the thing, and I have no idea. But I enjoyed it, and just be aware that it is frustrating by design. So be aware going in if you're going to try and play this one. I am glad that I didn't play this one on stream, because it's the kind of frustrating that I think would have been exacerbated knowing that people were watching me fail over and over again trying to beat these bosses. Playing it on my own, I think with this one was a better call. Some games play well on stream. Some I'm like, that's better. I played that on my own time. This was one of those, but I did like it. Jotun, have you played it? Have you heard of it? Did it sound intriguing what I described? I don't know. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out there, like, share, and subscribe are all of great assistance. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. And now my thanks to my Patreon supporters that make this possible, including Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Jen, T. Love, Auntie Kate 808, Bernabe Likes the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Dave Hall, Shayla Gourlay, and Rosalind Bennett. You can get I get all the names right and then I can't talk. If you want to hear me stumble over my tongue after saying your name, it's in the rewards here on the Patreon.